It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Judge Freddy Apfel.
Deputy now.
But you were a judge?
Yeah, they call me deputy judge.
Well, Freddy, it's such a great honor and a privilege to be with you in your beautiful home in Netanya. And Freddy, you were born in 1933 in Berlin, the same year that Hitler came to power.
Yeah.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your parents, and what
I can't remember very much. I was only 5 when I came to England. The only thing I can remember of any note is that on Kristalnacht, my father had already been arrested by the Gestapo and had been taken off shipped off to Poland. That's a long story. But my mother was left with me and my brother Jack, and Kristalnacht, and I remember we were hiding in the cellar from frightened of what was going on while they were smashing the windows.
And you remember it?
Oh yeah, very frightening.
And Freddy, do you remember the Hitler Youth marching, or do you remember in the streets?
No, I can't say that. I can tell you this, my father told me that he was once within either 10 yards or 10 feet, I've forgotten which, of Hitler himself, and he could have killed him.
And where was your father taken?
My father was born in Nowy Sącz in Poland, and he never went to yeshiva. He learnt in those days in Besmedrish, him and a few boys, and he told me how they used to beg the shamus of the shul to keep the waste wax from the Havdalah candle so they could have wax to light candles to learn a bit longer at night. And he grew up that way, and he got his first semicha from the Av Beis Din of Chemischel when he was 18 years of age. And then he decided he wanted to widen his horizons, and he went to Berlin to the Hildesheimer Seminar, studied there, and got the semicha there.
And your mother, where did your mother come from?
My mother was born in Chemischel, in Poland. She was a teacher in a school.
And how did she land up in Germany?
Listen, my father was working there, so we lived. I can't say there was anything we were worried about until the last, I mean, I can't remember any problems, but I was only 5.
And what did your father do? What type of...
He was a rabbi, and he was qualified as rabbi, qualified as a chazan in the conservatoire in Berlin, and he qualified as an Ofershochet. And he was working in Berlin. One of his closest friends, who he worked with and who helped to get him to England, was the man who later became the communal rabbi of Manchester, Rabbi Dr. Altman.
And Freddy, you mentioned that just before Kristalnacht, your father was taken...
Oh, I woke up one day to be told that my father wasn't there anymore. The Gestapo had arrested him, but because the war hadn't started yet, and he was Polish, they deported him to Poland. And he was put on a train to Poland, but when they got to the Polish border, the Poles wouldn't let them in. So they were stuck on the train on the border for a long time. And later he got back there, and Rabbi Altman got him a visa, and he came in 1938 to England.
But do you remember him returning from the train?
No, I only remember my father when we got to England a year later.
So he never came home after he was released? And what about your parents, their extended families?
Well, my father's parents, my father's mother and sister were Holocaust victims. My father's father died in a hospital. Oh. My mother's parents, mother and father, and one brother were Holocaust victims.
Were they living in Poland?
Yeah, perished in the Holocaust.
Do you know what happened? Which
We
camps?
don't know, no. But her other brother managed to escape, Uncle Mendel. He escaped into Russia. The Russians arrested him and put him in Siberia. And he escaped from Siberia. And he made his way right across the Russian continent over to England in the snow, and he says he was with the snakes and the wolves, and he says the people who helped him the most were the Meshuggah Cossacks. And he came to England, and in the end he became a shochet here, and he was shochet in Northampton and Leeds.
Do you have any other memories, your earliest memory, your earliest recollection?
The only memory I've got really of any note is Kristalnacht. Except I know when we came to England, we came on a boat called the SS United States. And I remember we got to Southampton, and the boat didn't go right into Southampton, and we literally walked from the big ship to a small ship, walked the plank.
And was your father waiting to...
No, he was already in Leeds.
Oh, so he couldn't welcome you when you came?
No, we stayed in London with my mother's aunt in Golders Green for a while, and then we went up to Leeds.
So can I ask, how did your mother manage? It was you and your brother?
Not only did she manage, she schlepped over to England all the house furniture, including wardrobes, and a big upright piano. That upright piano came from Poland to Berlin, from Berlin to England, and it's now in Petah Tikva.
And what date did you go? What date did you arrive in England?
I arrived in England 1939, September, just a month before the war.
In August?
Yeah. About August.
Literally a month before?
Yeah.
So you were one of the last boats to leave from Germany?
Could be. I wasn't on the Kindernacht, but I was separate. But I was 5 when I got here. Couldn't speak a word of English.
And how old was your brother?
2.5. Maybe 3. That's brother Jack. Because David and Nathan were born in England.
But how did your mother manage to get into England? Was she sponsored or?
No, she managed to. My father, once he was in England, can't forget they were Polish, and the war hadn't started yet. So she got a visa and she came to England.
Do you remember the street that you lived in Germany, in Berlin?
I know the school where my father was, called the Neue Alterstrasse. But I was only a kid, remember.
And the street that you lived in, do you have any...
Can't remember.
Do you know the name of the street that you
can't remember now.
Have you ever been back to Berlin?
No, I'll tell you a story about that. After the war, the German government wanted to show how good they were, how they were making reparations. So they invited me and my brother Jack to come to Berlin for 2 weeks. They would pay the flight and they would pay hotel. All we had to do was find pocket money. And I refused, I wouldn't go. My brother Jack went, but I wouldn't go. And I've never been back.
And can I ask, when you left with your mother,
when what?
Do you remember leaving the building? Do you remember going on the ship when you went to England?
I remember being on the ship. Yeah, I mean, that's all I can say. And I knew I was on a ship.
And how was the journey? Was this the first time?
No, uneventful.
Was this the first time you were ever on a ship?
Yeah. Big ship it was. I think he later became a troop carrier.
And when you got to England, who welcomed you when you arrived?
My mother's aunt and her husband from Golders Green.
What were their names? Do you...
Storm. Livish Storm and Shindle Storm. He was a mashgiach to the people who make the bush, not Bloom, the other one. in the Golders Green. He was a mashgiach there.
And how long did you stay in Golders Green?
Oh, I think it was only a few weeks, that's all.
And then you went to Leeds?
Then we got on the train and went to Leeds.
Okay, now I'd like to ask you, when you saw your father, you had been separated from your father for...
A few months.
How was that interaction when you saw your father again? Do you recall?
No, I don't. Obviously, I must have been very happy.
Yeah. Must have been also very emotional.
Yeah, of course.
But you don't have recollections?
No. All I know is I came to England and I couldn't speak a word of English. And he had a job by then in Leeds, and he went from there, and I went to school in Leeds.
Was it a Jewish school you went to?
No, there were a lot of Jewish kids. Most of the Jewish kids in Leeds went to this school called Cowper Street.
And your father's job, was he a rabbi in Leeds?
Originally, he was chazan in Leeds, but then later he was appointed to the Beis Din, and he was a dayan on the Beis Din a few years, and then later he became Av Beit Din. He was Av Beit Din for 20 years. For Leeds and the whole area. That's Leeds, Bradford, York, Harrogate, Doncaster, all that area, Sheffield, all the whole area.
And Freddie, can I ask, when you were going to school, how did you learn English? Did you just pick it up, or...?
I don't know, but I can tell you this, when you're a kid you learn a language quickly.
You adapt?
You have to, otherwise you don't get out.
And the other kids, did you ever experience any anti-Semitism or any anti-Jewish feeling?
No, the only time I experienced anti-Semitism was much later, when I was about to qualify as a lawyer. But as a kid, no. A bit in school, but we coped with it.
And most of your friends, were they the Jewish kids?
Yeah.
Or did you have non-Jewish friends as well?
As well, yeah.
And did any of the kids ask you about growing up in Germany, or...?
No, not that I can remember anyway.
Okay. Now, the war starts and you in Leeds. Did you know what was going on in Germany or what was going on in Europe?
No. I knew there was something going on, but a kid, you don't understand these things.
And during the war, people, the inhabitants of Leeds, did you feel any bombing from the German army or the pilots?
No, there was, Leeds itself wasn't bombed heavily at all, because it was the industrial areas, but my father was one of the air raid wardens. Can you imagine, with a helmet on.
And the war years, was it very difficult? Were there rations or...?
No, it was ration, yeah, I remember. We had ration books. We had ration books and everything. You had to give in coupons.
But you were never evacuated from...
No. It wasn't necessary from Leeds. And later, after a number of years, my father was actually appointed twice as rabbi to the Ashkenazi community of Amsterdam. There's a picture there, I'll show you. But he decided to stay in Leeds.
And your father, did he, becoming the Beis Din, it's a very prestigious, it's a very high position, it's one of the highest positions. But he must have been very grateful that he left Germany, that he survived.
Of course, yeah, of course. We were all grateful. When you get older, you begin to understand.
Now, did your father have colleagues from the seminary from Berlin that didn't manage to leave, that were stuck in Germany?
I'm sure he must have done, but I don't know who they were. I'm sure. But I remember when we used to go to shul on a Friday night, the German Orthodox Jews all used to dress very seriously and in top hats. And I'll tell you something else my father told me. The German Jews were far richer, far more well connected with the higher echelons, and far more with the universities, and far richer with the bankers than anybody in England has ever been. And yet look what happened in 2 minutes.
How do you
And that's
explain
why
that?
it's a warning. Anybody, in my opinion now, who stays in England is a fool.
Because you can be on top and then it can change.
2
overnight.
minutes. It'll happen in England. Those Jews who stay in England won't be able to survive there. Too many Muslims now in England.
There's a lot of anti-Jewish feeling.
Yeah.
And how did the German Jews interact with the British Jews?
Well, as I say, I saw no difficulties, but I was only a kid.
And
Some of the German Jews were put into camps during the war. Not concentration camps, but camps to keep them out of the way in case they were fifth colonists.
or aliens that
Yeah.
saw them as aliens. Some were actually shipped to Australia or Canada.
No, he wasn't. They stayed. Those, I know those that stayed in the Leeds area.
And did your father ever have connections with Rabbi Schoenfeld?
Yeah, he knew him very well. We never had any close connection. He knew him.
And Diane Dunner?
He knew Diane Dunn, yeah.
And
And Diane Grunfeld.
And Orenthal?
Yeah, he was very, yeah.
He was connected with all the Rabbonim.
Yeah. Very friendly, very great friend of Rabbi Yakovovitz.
The chief rabbi.
Yeah. Also very, very friendly and very close to Rabbi Sachs. I'll tell you something else, a person I knew. He was Chief Rabbi of South Africa for a while, Cyril Harris. I knew him very well.
He was from Scotland originally.
Yeah, but you see he was from Glasgow. The reason I knew him was because during the last few months, for a year, when I was doing my last year of studies, I stayed in digs in London. And I used to go every day for lunch to Jews College. And I used to meet him there.
It's incredible. Fred, can I just ask you, because it's so fascinating, because you lived through one of the most incredible periods of Jewish history. I
only lived, but only as a kid, you know.
But when the war was raging from 39 to 45, did you discuss it at home, or did you know what was happening?
Oh, when I was getting older, when I was in my teenage or later hour, yeah. But you know, when you're a youngster, you don't look at it the same way.
And your parents, were they discussing what was going on in Europe or in Germany?
I'm sure they did, but I can't remember what they discussed.
And what did you speak at home? What language did you speak?
That's a good question. I spoke English or German, but my parents spoke Yiddish and German. And if they wanted to speak something they didn't want me to hear, they'd speak in another language.
Could you understand Yiddish?
Yeah, I can speak Yiddish. German, I can understand, but I'm not very good at speaking it.
And writing, you can?
No. But I can understand it. I'll tell you a funny story. We used to come to Eilat for holiday a lot. I was once in the Caesar Hotel, and at breakfast, you know, in those days, a lot of continentals, including Germans, used to come to Eilat because it was cheap, the exchange rate. And at the next table there were some Germans discussing breakfast, and they were complaining how it's not right that in this hotel they can't have a breakfast of ham.
And it was in German?
Bacon. I could understand it.
Sure. And really, I want to ask, because it's so fascinating that you lived through this period. When the war ended, do you remember when D-Day?
Oh yeah. I remember watching it on television.
And when did you find out what had happened to your extended family that were in Poland?
Oh, it was after the war.
It was only after the war.
We didn't know at the time.
It was only after the war.
Yeah.
Your parents must have been devastated when they...
Of course. Yeah.
And when the State of Israel was declared, there must have also been very momentous.
Now I'll tell you something funny. My Hebrew birthday is Hey Be'er. You know Hey Be'er, Independence Day. That's my Hebrew birthday.
But you remember the partition plan, and you remember...
No, no.
But you remember in 48 when...
Oh yeah,
when
of course.
the state was declared?
Because I was a member of B'nai Akiva for a long time.
And was it difficult before the state was declared, when it was under British occupation, when the mandate, when there were the skirmishes between the Irgun and the British, and there was a lot of altercations and there was a lot of anti-Jewish feeling when... Did that affect you at all? Did you remember?
Oh yeah, of course I remember, but there was also a lot of, which was very unfortunate, and they should have been ashamed of themselves, between the Haganah and the Irgun. And the trouble between them two wasn't right.
Yeah.
Can you imagine one Jew trying to kill another there, Haganah trying to kill the Irgun? It's not right.
There was the Altalina, the whole Altalina incident. And going to university, which university?
Leeds. I studied in Leeds. I got my LLB, and then I studied further and got my master's degree in law.
And going to university, was it a problem, Shabbat or the Chagim?
No, and I'll tell you something else. When I was at school, the high school, they used to have school on a Shabbos then. And I never used to go, but I never suffered by it. And I have to say this, that when I qualified, I can honestly say that I've never lost a penny through not going to court on either Yom Tov or Friday night, and I've never lost a penny.
And your clients that you had,
they understood.
But
a guy understands if you're genuine.
Yeah. But you had Jewish and non-Jewish clients.
Oh yeah, more non-Jewish than Jewish.
And people knew you were Jewish.
Of course.
And at university, you never had any anti-Jewish feeling, or?
No, no. The only anti-Jewish feeling I had, and I could never prove it, it was in my final examination. And one of the exams you have to do is what's called bookkeeping and trust accounts. And the exam was on November on a Friday afternoon. And of course Friday afternoon Shabbos comes in early. So I wrote to the Law Society and I asked them, could I take the exam in the morning instead and lock me up till no. So then I asked them, well, could they let me in early and then let me do the exam a bit earlier? They refused. There was a lot of anti-Semitism then in the Law Society. And then, so finally, I more or less had to learn the book off by heart. And I went in and I packed up an hour before the end. I left my pen and everything with another pupil from Leeds who was a Goy, semi-Goy, and I had to walk from King's Cross to Golders Green in the middle of winter.
It's quite a walk.
Yeah, but I passed.
And being appointed, even deputy judge, but being appointed a judge, that's a big deal.
Oh yeah, I was one of the, in those days, I was a solicitor. In England you have solicitors and barristers, and the solicitors very rarely became judges. I was one of the few original ones. There were others, including Jewish. I was one of the original ones who was actually appointed as a deputy judge. And then I changed over to become a barrister.
And how long did you act as a deputy judge?
9 years.
And did you always want to make Aliyah to come to Israel?
Oh yes, I mean definitely. And I visited Israel a lot. For 25 years before I made Aliyah, I used to come to Israel with Freya twice every year for Sukkot and for Pesach. We used to stay at the Dam Panorama in Tel Aviv. And then we decided once it got to the stage I was getting older, I retired from everything. I was going to retire. I didn't have to retire because it's not like a doctor, you can go on as long as you want when you're a barrister. But I decided enough's enough, and we decided to come here. I was 1995 when I made Aliyah.
And you're happy you made Aliyah?
Oh yeah. We brought 192 boxes, packing boxes. Terrible it was.
You brought all your Sforim, all the books. You got some very valuable books that we'll see.
There's a lot of others, but we got rid of them.
And Freddy, can I ask, looking back, you've never been back to Germany?
I wouldn't go near it.
And Poland?
I've never been back to Poland. The Polish were the bigger anti-Semitic. You couldn't have a worse anti-Semite than a Catholic and a Pole.
And can I ask, in your home, did you buy German goods?
Only if I couldn't get others. I would never have a German car. I would never have anything German unless I couldn't get it in else. I wouldn't have a Mercedes, I wouldn't have a BMW. Always been against German goods.
And how do you feel today that Germany in Europe is actually one of the biggest part of Europe? They're very supportive of Israel compared to many other European countries that are very anti.
Germany's not so. Germany on the face of it, but Germany now is telling Israel to stop the war in Gaza. I don't trust the Germans, I'm sorry. They've republished Mein Kampf. There's lots of Hitler youth groups growing up again in Germany. To me, that I wouldn't trust them as far as I can throw
The
them.
right wing, unfortunately, is gaining support, tremendous support.
All right, but there was a big debate between Begin and Ben Gurion about that. Begin didn't want to take their support, the money.
Yeah, the reparations.
And I must tell you this, I'm now classed as a survivor, not because I was in the camps, but because I was in Kristalnacht. So that means I now get compensation from the Germans. It's only a small amount, but I get it, and I get all my medicines here in Israel free.
At least that's something.
Yeah.
So really, if I can ask you, what message do you impart to your children and grandchildren and to the future generations?
In what respect?
What advice do you give, or what?
I give them the present advice, which is the advice that everybody should give. Don't rely on anybody else, rely on yourself and trust in God. But don't trust in God alone. You've got to do your job as well.
It's a wonderful message. So Freddy, I just want to thank you. I think this has been so special, coming to Netanya, especially in Netanya, and that you gave a Dvatorah in the shul, in the young Israel.
And by the way, there's one other thing I can tell you, if you want to put it how I met Freya.
Please, if you could go ahead.
If you want, yeah, because we're both refugees.
How did you meet Freya?
Is it working? Do you remember 1956?
The Suez Canal.
Suez Canal. Well, Nasser expelled not people because they were Jewish, but all Israelis, all French and all British, because of the Suez crisis, right? And amongst those expelled were Freya and her family. Her mother, her father, her grandmother, and Freya and her brothers in 1956. And they were all kicked out at 2 weeks' notice, and they could bring one suitcase. And by chance, her group came to a place near Leeds called Horsforth. And we, from Leeds, went to them to see them on Pesach to bring matzahs. And that's how I met her. So one refugee from Egypt and the other refugee from Germany met here, met in Leeds.
And Freya, you are from Alexandria. You grew up in Alexandria.
Yeah.
And how many years have you been married?
66.
Canaan horror, that's wonderful. Sure. That is, well, please God, many, many more years.
Thank you.
Together in good health and nachas and.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
We've got a big family here now. We've got 8 granddaughters.
Wonderful.
And we've got 13 great-grandchildren and 3 more to come.
Baruch Hashem. And they're living in Israel?
All except one. The one. My son lives in London. But I keep telling him he's got to come here.
So, Freddie, I am so grateful to you. I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much.
You.
It's been such an honor and a privilege.
No, so you slept here.
I'm really grateful from the bottom of my heart. I cannot thank you enough.
Now, you sure you don't want a drink?
I just, being in your presence, being here, it's just been amazing.
Thank you.
And somebody who witnessed Kristalnacht and survived. It's a major...
Yeah, but luckily we managed to hide away in the cellar. But it was frightening.
So thank God your parents had the chokhmah, to leave. That your mother, that she packed a month before.
Yeah.
If it would have been a month later.
Too late.
It would have been too late.
Yeah.
And you know, they say out of 600,000 Jews in Germany, at the end of the war, only 10,000 survived.
Yeah, and they
out
were
of 600,000.
So it's a very big community, very wealthy community.
And look, the rise and fall of the Jews of Germany.
Yeah.
So I really want to thank you so much.
Not at all.
And may Vesrim till 120 in good health and bracha.
It's been an honour.
So it's been an honour for me, honour and a privilege.
All right. Now, do you want to look at some of the pictures?
I'd love to, because I think the pictures that you have
I'll explain
are so special, and you've got such a beautiful home here in Netanya.
Oh, we can't. Yeah, we were
It's wonderful.
Right opposite the shul.
It's wonderful. And this is your dear family?
Yeah, this is some of the family.
But you have very special pictures of your father being honoured by the Queen.
Yeah, so here. That is a picture of 4 generations. That's me and Freya, generation 1. Lillian, our daughter, generation 2. Odea, generation 3.
Wow.
And that little girl, generation 4.
That is wonderful. That's wonderful.
Right, here, you've seen this picture.
So this is with...
Leeds based in.
So this is... And where's your father in the picture? And who is this?
That's Rabbi, I've forgotten his name. He also was a rabbi in Leeds.
With Lord Jacobowitz,
Yeah.
And this is in Clifford Tower with
That's Clifford Tower when they took off the ban on York.
Because there was a ban that Jews shouldn't sleep over in York.
Well, that was when the ban was raised. That's the Archbishop of York, Jacob Bobovich, my father and my mother, and that's Clifford's Tower. And that's my mother and father in Buckingham Palace with the medal, and me and Jack and David. And that's the certificate from the Queen, signed by the Queen.
And there's Elizabeth's signature.
There's a signature.
And here's your father with the
medal, yeah.
He got the
MBE.
MBE. And this...
That's his smicha. That's his certificate for Overshogen. No, that's for Overshogen. That's the one when he was going to Amsterdam. That little caption there.
Did he go to Amsterdam?
No, he stayed in Leeds.
And this is from the seminar in Berlin?
Yeah. And that's the signature of the famous Freddy Apfel. When I tell people, rabbis, that my father's got smicha from Freddy Apfel, everyone says, wow.
It is, it's a big thing, it's a big schut.
And that's me when I was sitting as deputy judge.
And here you're with Jonathan Law, with Rabbi Sachs.
Yeah, and there as well, Rabbi Sachs. I was president of the shul.
What was the Leeds?
Yeah.
What was the name of the shul?
Eitz Chaim.
Eidsheim Centenary in 1999.
Yeah.
And over here is Operation Noble.
Yeah, that was a big inquiry into a murder, and there was a whole commission set up, and I was the chairman of that commission. It was very well known in England.
And was it successful?
Yeah, we had to look into all the evidence, and that's me announcing our findings.
And then,
that's me as a student.
how old were you at this time? In the
20, in the early 20s.
Here's your degree of Bachelor of Law and
then above their master.
Final examination. 1956, and here was 54 and 53. Wow. And these pictures?
Now, this is me when I used to do jiu-jitsu. And I used to play table tennis for the university. And that was my part of the extended family when my father retired from the shul. That's my mother and father when they got married. And that's my father's parents and my mother's parents.
Your mother's parents. It's amazing that these photos survived. Because these photos were taken in Poland.
Yeah.
So you can see you come from a very from family.
Yeah. And that's a family photo, quite when we were all youngsters. That's Dad, Mum, me, Jack, who's no longer alive, Nebuch, Nathan and David.
And here's your...
That's my parents at for dinner.
And this
that's my mother's class. My mother's class.
Where was this taken? In Poland? Was it at a Jewish
school? It was a girls'
school?
seminary. I don't think so, no.
And in this picture...
That's my wedding, when we got married.
That is so special. And Freddie, can we go in your study? You have a very, very interesting study. So these books are, these forum are, some are more than 300 years old.
Some of these are more than 300 years old, yeah. From my father's collection.
And here you have Beit HaMidrash HaGadol, Rabbi Joseph Apfel. And this is your father's class in Berlin.
And that's the famous Freddy And that's his smicha.
From the Rabbiner seminar in Berlin.
That was the most famous rabbinical seminar at the time.
And this is in Montreux, in Switzerland.
Yeah, that's where the 3 was. That's a picture of him when he was much older.
So Freddie, this is really incredible. You come from such a Choshever family, and you know, I'm sure your family, to think that their son gave a Dvar Torah in the Young Israel here in Netanya.
I give a lot of lectures. I speak a lot on Shabbat afternoons, Suda Shlishit.
So I want to thank you so much.
Not at all. I thank you for coming. Can I offer you a drink now? Yeah?
Thank you very much.
What?
So this is your father's book, Yad Yosef.
Yeah.
And it's on Shuvas and Shadas and Shuvas. The responses. He's
responser, yeah. Now let me show you something. You mentioned Guy Rappaport. Well, I can't find him. Did you remember Ryan Kaplan? There he wrote for.
Skoma.
Rappaport was a great friend of my father's. He was a great man, was Ryan Rappaport. Very, very clever man. Great posek. Yeah. And in here
was your father very in close contact with Rav Herzog?
No, but he was in contact with Rav Goren.
With Rav Goren.
Let me show you something. Letters here from Lubavitcher Rebbe.
Rav Schneerson?
Yeah. No.
This is so special.
Here, Rappaport. Rav Elyashiv was with a lot of. I've got a lot of original letters
from Rav
Elyashiv, from the Sridei and from Moshe Feinstein.
Your father was in contact with Moshe Feinstein?
Yeah.
And you have the original letters, the correspondence?
I've got them, yeah, I've got them some. But here, there's a lot of correspondence here between them.
There was Diane Alloy,
Yeah.
Rav Alloy in South Africa, and then Rav Kutznak took over. So they could have had contact as well.
Maybe.
It's wonderful. So precious.
I'll put this away.
Thank you so much.
When the Lubavitcher Rebbe had his 70th birthday, the Lubavitchers asked my dad to write an article, and he did. They put it in the book, and again when he was 80.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. Sure.
Pleasure.
So Freddie, this is a very, very special award that was bestowed to you and your dear wife from the English-speaking branch of the Association for Israeli Soldiers. And this is a clubhouse that you donated for the Matpash. Where is the clubhouse?
Not far from Jerusalem, on the border.
Kol hakavod, it's fantastic.
It's what they call the Red Fortress. Something Adumah, forgotten.
But it's wonderful what you've done, and it's such a great appreciation. Really, thank you so much.
Okay. That's why Israeli will not listen to him. Whatever you say to him, he won't listen. Some say you should try and reason with him, you should try and discuss it with him. The answer to that is, in my opinion, and I'll show you why in a minute, and I've got some support from it from the Talmud, if he's the kind of person who just will not listen, don't waste your time with him. Leave him to it. As they say in Yiddish, let him lick in dread. Now, why do I say it? How many of you watched the film 12 Angry Men?
Yeah.
You remember the scene in that film where it's Henry Fonda's in it, where it's a trial of a person who was later proved to be innocent, but there was one person on the jury who was a complete, utter, who wouldn't listen. He was bigoted. And two of the other jurymen, if you remember, tried to convince him to listen to reason, and he wouldn't. And if you remember, Henry Fonda says to him at the end of the day, he says this: don't bother, because he says he can't hear you and he never will. And there's support for that in the Talmud. The Talmud tells us that you should try to reason with somebody if you can, but if you can't, then don't waste your time and just leave him to it, because you'll never get anywhere with him. And I'd like to finish off maybe on today on a slightly humorous tone. It's an extract from an incident that's mentioned in Baba Basra, in Baba Kama. It says this: the law in the halakha is, if somebody boxes the ear, this is what the Talmud says, if somebody boxes the ear, X boxes the ear of Y, then he has to pay him compensation. And an incident is related that one person boxed the ear of another person, and he was ordered by Rav Huna to pay him half a zuz. The problem was, he didn't have half a zuz. What did he have? He only had a battered old zuz, which he could not exchange because nobody would take it, so he couldn't pay. So what was he advised to do? What did he do? He boxed his ear again and paid him with that zuz. וחנניה בן הקשיא אומר, עשה הקדוש ברוך הוא, וצחקו ישראל לפיך, אחר בהם תורה ומצוות, שנאמר, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה בידי.
Amen.